Gracias y buenas noches nuevamente. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenides a nuestro. Sorry, I was speaking in Spanish, and this meeting is going to be held in English today, which is something very strange for Afroresistance. So welcome everyone to our space, to our home. Afroresistance, previously known as the Latin American and Caribbean Community Center, has the mission to educate, organize for human rights, racial justice, and democracy throughout the Americas. Our organization was 20 years old in this past May. We're very proud of that big accomplishment. And we are truly honored to be accompanied by everybody here today. Today we're accompanied by myself, Jean-Pierre Williams Comrie. I'm also the founder and current executive director of the organization. And we're accompanied also by Argelis Wesley, who is the operations director at Afroresistance. And we also have Chevy Solis, who is the Panama coordinator. We are all here present. And we also have our special guest, Amilcar Priestley, who is based here in New York, where I am based as well. And we'll get into who Amilcar is a little bit later. So basically, the objectives of the call are to gather, right, to speak a little bit about the current situation in Panama, what has happened, what historically has been happening. This is not new to what has been going on in Panama for many years. It's just that now it has gotten to a point where it has gathered international attention. Migration has always been happening in Panama. It is not new. And emigration has always happened in Panama. As hopefully everybody on this call knows, um, we did have a canal. We do have a canal, and with that canal, with the construction of that canal, came a lot of international attention and interventions as well, and that has led to what we have today. So what we have today is not an isolated event. It has been a historic accumulation of events. And those historic accumulations of events have also led to what we're seeing today, which is also the oppression of Black people, the isolation of Black people, the exploitation of Black people, and basically the violence that as Black people we continue to experience, not only in Panama, but as people transit through Panama and as people live in the diaspora. Part of what we're mandated to do, not only through Afroresistance and with Afroresistance, but I feel a strong connection as being a Black person, is to stand up for the rights of Black people wherever they are. So with that, welcome everybody. I am really happy to see a lot of comrades in the space with us, including Keisha. It's an honor for folks to be here. So without further ado, we'll get into it. And this is a conversation, right? I'm going to present Amilcar Priestley, who is a dear friend, family as well. He's a distinguished lawyer, and he's a director of a really amazing organization. Also, that is a few years old. This is nothing new. We are not new to this game. We have been through all the stages of organizing the Afro-Latino Project, and that organization is renowned for the dedication to preserving the rich cultural and historical heritage of not only Panama, but I can safely say, and of Afro-Latin America and the Caribbean, leading a respected non-governmental organization. Amilcar and a team have harnessed the power of digital and mobile technology to ensure that the vast legacy and experiences of Afro-Latinos and African descendants are meticulously collected and conserved. And I can say that Amilcar has really worked tirelessly to really honor our legacy, the rich tapestry that we are today as well. So Amilcar, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for joining us on this dialogue. Thank you for centering Panama as well. And Amilcar is also Panamanian. So it's important for me to also share that. So the conversation today is, what is happening in Panama? And as I said, this is not new. So if you could just give us, some, I'll hand it over to you, America.
Sure. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking with everyone. Thank you, Genevieve and Argelis, and for the invitation. It's much appreciated, Chevy. Thank you for the invitation. Um, so I guess I can start by saying, and you alluded to it a little earlier, that the trajectory of immigration in Panama is a large one and a long one. Um, and hold on one second. And I would say that the recent iteration um, has probably been the most one of the more interesting in the last 40 years. There's been several influxes of migrants in Panama, and the earlier ones was the construction of the railroad. Subsequent to that, when the French failed to be able to pull the canal together and the United States took over, um, with the support of J.P. Morgan, of course, and financially and facilitated the annexation of an independence of Panama from Colombia. You have the Panama Canal. Through that, there was a huge influx of West Indian migrant workers. Many of our descendants are from that migration. Were responsible for the construction of the canal. Those folks, around 60, between 60 and 68, many of them left once the United States um, decided that they were going to no longer employ folks on the canal. The United States had put in place a Jim Crow laws that were in existence on the continental United States, on the military bases and within the Panama Canal Zone area. And so a lot of those um, um, migrants that came in and worked on the canal were no longer able to get employment. They experienced racism. They experienced a lot of xenophobia. Um, they experienced, interestingly enough, and this is one of the things, there was not just interracial discrimination, but there was intraracial tensions as well. And that had that interethnic tension had been proven to be problematic as far as movement building for many years. And I think I would say maybe 30 years ago, the we finally were able to get past a lot of that, and make progress from a Black movement perspective, to the state where we are now. And we have a long way to go. The trajectory has been long and large. The movement currently is facing some interesting challenges, primarily because of the new administration that was inaugurated on July 1st of this year, Jose Raul Molino. And he as some of you may or may not know, was the former head of security under the President Ricardo Martinelli, who was recently convicted on corruption charges. Um, and just for a quick background, as far as the election goes, that occurred. That campaign season began last fall, concluded in May. He was inaugurated 2 weeks ago, but it was originally the former president who was running. He was declared ineligible to run. He put his support behind Molino, and Molino, through a kind of fragmented um, uh, opposition, was able to pull in enough votes to win. Um, One of the keys to his success, I would argue, was his position on the border, on migration. Um, and he doesn't have the best track record as far as protecting the civil rights and human rights of others. About 12 years ago, he was responsible for several deaths of indigenous members of Panama, of indigenous communities in Panama, the Noe Bugle, in a province called Bocas del Toro, who were protesting, and he sent security forces in. And so, he doesn't have the greatest track record. So one of the big concerns with this, I wouldn't say go so far as to say mandate, but he has been empowered by this election to put forth some of the rhetoric that you may have heard and will continue to hear, most likely, over the next few years. Um, but he's been empowered, unfortunately, to move in this direction of closing. That just happened this week. Closing the frontera, closing the border, in a similar fashion to what the United States has done, basically in between the Texas and Mexico border, using barbed wire. Um, there's a lot of human rights implications in that. There are a number of people on both sides of the country, on both sides of the border, that are in favor and in opposition to his actions. The head of security obviously is in support of it. There are many pastors who have lent critical voices to these actions. The Defensoría del Pueblo, which is the ombudsman's office, has expressed concern for the implementation of the actions that Molino has agreed to take on behalf of the United States, and frankly, on behalf of a certain faction within Panama, a certain sector. I think, interestingly enough, it's probably in it is a fairly diverse sector, perhaps not racially, but economically. But there are detractors and supporters of his actions, and one of the things that us as a movement have been working towards is, in the last month and a half or so since the election, is gauging where he's taking his agenda, gauging who he's employing in certain positions, and seeing if these will be retreads, which so far they have been, or whether or not there will be a new discourse introduced. That so far does not look likely. Well, two examples that I can give are the newly installed Minister of Education, who was the former Minister of Education under Martinelli, and a number of other, Lucy Molinar, who's a Black Panamanian woman, um, as well as what has been rumored to be an attempt or an effort to replace the current head of the Secretaría de Senadap, which is the Secretaría for Asuntos Afropanameños, para el Desarrollo de Afropanameños. And there's a movement, rumored movement, to replace the current person who is technically by law mandated to serve through October 2025, I believe, to replace her currently with the individual who is the first president of Senadap. Senadap at one point was not an independent entity. It was part of or under, I believe it was the Ministry of Culture. I could be mistaken offhand. But in the last 4 years, the movement has worked, within the framework of Panama's laws to position the agency as a semi-autonomous entity with its own budget, and that can set its own budget and agendas, which is a big step, which is a huge step, and in fact, I would argue, makes the movement in Panama one of the foremost movements in the region as far as the level of progress up until this point that has been made, particularly within the last 10 to 12 to 15 years, within the framework of the laws, of the existing laws of any respective country. You have in Brazil, there was a push under Bolsonaro to delegitimize the Ministry of Culture and of Racial Equity. And in Colombia, most recently, although we have the victory which we can all point to of Francia Marquez as vice president with Pedro Gustavo, there have been pushes to remove that ministry of racial equity as well. Meanwhile, in Panama, we've been able to institutionalize it. Now we don't know where that's going to go in the next few years, and unfortunately, we are kind of waiting with bated breath, but also planning for various possibilities. I know that one of the things that we want to talk about, and John David, we can maybe get into it a bit more, is the acuerdo itself that that was signed on July 1st, that basically Mallorca's brought down to the inauguration. I would almost guess already written. Um, that proffered to give Panama up to initially $60 million in assistance, and that's less than, I mean, and there have been past administrations that have given millions of dollars to facilitate this, but to facilitate Panama's interdiction of migrants. But this is a decided shift in positioning of Panama. I think one of the things that we've always revered, particularly since the invasion, or up until the, depending on how you look at it, up until the invasion, was our sovereignty. Some might argue that after the invasion, that's been put on the back burner in the interest of a certain economic development models. But I'll leave that to a different conversation. But the framework around which the agreements are going to be implemented are going to be interesting, because they're going to impact our desire to maintain our national sovereignty by many, but also there's an existing and an existing tension and in an underlying current of many decades of Panama's elite, who have always wanted to maintain very close relationships with the United States, and this acuerdo will go towards that. There are many other issues. There are environmental issues that may or may not be addressed, but they've been thrown out there. There are issues of cultural heritage preservation. The region in which much of this is happening is a Black and Indigenous region. And so, you know, as we are concerned with the migrant populations, and a lot of them are Black and a lot of them are not, we also, there has to be and there ought to be due consideration to the preservation of, I mean, from an environmental perspective, what are arguably the lungs of Central America, and from a cultural perspective, one of the last bastions of cimarron heritage, maroon heritage descendancy in the Americas. So I guess I'll leave it at that, and just we can get into a broader conversation.
No, thank you. Thank you. Amilcar, my son decided to come in right now. And we're gonna have some spaces for question and answer. If there is any questions, please put them on the chat. We're just gonna keep going through the informations that we have. We are planning a delegation, right, to Panama, as we mentioned, where we will be exploring centering migration, right? But all the stuff that Amilcar spoke about and touched on, we will also be discussing and touching on during our time in Panama. So I'm gonna hand it over to Argelis. That's gonna go over some of the information for the delegation. And then we're gonna come back and cover some more information around migration and around the border. So Argelis, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, and thank you, Amilcar, for this thorough analysis. First of all, let me thank you for being here, and I'm going to give you some details of this international delegation. As Jean-Pierre has said before, migration in Panama is not new, and there are some accumulated issues that my colleague Amilcar has very well explained. First of all, this is going to be an international delegation that is going to be organized not only by Afroresistance, but also by Espacio Encuentro de Mujeres. This is an organization that was founded by one of our colleagues, Chevy Solis, 10 years ago. And the beauty of this organization is that it is centered on Black feminism. And it also coordinates the only network of migrant women in Panama. We had defined 5 objectives for this delegation. First of all, we are going to get a better understanding of the complexities of Panamanian social reality that Amilcar has explained, and the human rights situation, especially the rise of Black population in the country. In 2022, the census of Panama revealed that there are more than 1 million people in Panama that auto-recognize themselves as Black. The second goal that we want to accomplish is to engage in a dialogue and analysis with several Panamanian groups, Afro-Panamanian groups. The movement of Black people in Panama is very solid, and we will meet with Afro-Panamanian leaders, environmental leaders, members of the LGBTQIA movement, labor movement, among others. We also want to cultivate partnerships and collaborative strategies with local and international stakeholders like yourself. So we want to focus and address the immediate needs that Black migrants have. In that way, we want to advocate for systematic changes in migration policies. We also want to document and analyze the increase of migration through the Darién Gap. We want to realize that there is a dramatic escalation from 2020 up to nowadays. And we also want to investigate and report on the type of abuses that women, children, men are challenging to the Darién Gap. This is a very important objective because those migrants are challenging several risks and humanitarian challenges. Now, I would like to focus now on the importance of international presence and solidarity. Not only you are going to be able to build solidarity and support networks, but also you will be able to impact on policy advocacy. So in that way, by understanding these systematic and structural conditions and problems in Latin America and the Caribbean region is very, very important so that US policy experts and activists like yourself will get an important role. Also, this foresight is very relevant for crafting resilient systems and policies that can adapt to change dynamics. Regarding the benefits that you are going to obtain, you will not only be a witness of what is happening right now in the border between Panama and Colombia. You are going to get that human perspective, and you will be able to shape a public perception about what is going on. This delegation is going to take place from October 20 up to October 26. On October 20, which is a Sunday, all the delegates must arrive to Panama. The next day, which is going to be on Monday, October 21st, which is an important date in Panama, we are going to travel to Darién. We're going to travel to a location called Metetí. And in Metetí, there is a shelter that is being managed by the government of Panama. So we are going to be able to see by first hand what is going on in the border. We are going to be there the whole day, and the next day, on Tuesday, October 22nd, we will have meetings in Metetí with leaders. We are going to return to Panama City that date, and the third day, which is going to be the fourth day of this delegation, on October 23rd, we are going to meet with organizations in Panama, the ones that I mentioned some minutes ago. And these meetings are going to take place 2 days, on October 23rd and October 24th. On October 25th is going to be a free day, but we have a plan to go to Portobelo. Portobelo is a unique location because in the European colonial times, that was a location where the aduanas, how do you say aduanas in English? Wow.
The port of entry,
Yes, thank you. The port of entries of enslaved people from the west coast of Africa arrived to that port. There is a museum, and that is the epicenter of the Congo culture. Recently, the Queen Congo died, and we are going to be witness of that environment. So regarding the, I think that that's it. And I'm going to give Jean-Pierre the opportunity to speak more about the application process and other issues that are very relevant to this delegation. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I hope to see you, all of you, in October.
Yes, I hope. Gracias. Thank you, Argelis. That was great. So a little bit of background, right, on delegations that we have had before. To date, Afroresistance has had, I believe, around 7 delegations. We have had delegations to Brazil, and to Brazil, to Ecuador, and to Colombia. And we have been doing delegations when delegations were not a thing, right? We do not engage in political tourism. You will not see us. I've been on delegations before where there's a lot of tourism. We do not do tourism. And this is, if you're looking for a cushy adventure, this is not the organization to do it with. I will say that. And I say that because the communities where Black people live are not cushy. They're not comfortable, right? And that is by design, right? And some people are just not comfortable with that. When we have gone, the few times we have been to Colombia 4 times, and we go to the Black communities, and that requires a specific lift, right? Black communities, for the most part, do not have hotels, right? They might have a community center, they might have a community center, which means shared accommodation. We do take care of elders, because in Black communities, elders are well taken care of. Elders are actually really respected. So elders do not have to worry about accommodations. They get the best accommodations in all the communities that they go to, in Black communities. But it might mean, and I do not think that's what it means for this delegation, it might mean in some of our delegations, people are sleeping in mattresses on a floor in a gym, right? That is what sometimes that means. Or we might be sleeping in people's houses, and when we sleep in people's houses that we vet and we have relationships with, trusted relationships with, people give us their best. But when people come from the United States, our best back home might not be the best in the United States, right? So there has to be a little shift that has to happen. And I say that so you do not come with expectations that are not met. And I also say that because when folks come from the United States, there has to be an adjustment. So it's easier and better for me to say these things now. So if you're coming with these expectations, do not apply. I encourage you, save yourself the hardship, save yourself the emotional, that whatever is there for you, like, don't be so uncomfortable that, like, don't push yourself, right? That's what I'm trying also to say. Do not push yourself to be that uncomfortable that you make it hard on yourself and on others around you and on the communities and the people that you're meeting. I just want to be upfront about that. The other thing is, you will be politicized at whatever level that you're at. we will always be politicized and we will always learn, all of us together. And the bonds are really strong, right? So that's something else. I do fall in love with every single human being that I meet on these delegations, and we do remain in touch. I have strong connections with most of the people that I have met 15, 16 years ago doing this work on the ground. We also, part of our commitment at Afroresistance is leaving money in Black people's hands, in Black women and girls' hands, and that requires a specific lift. We do not exploit people along the way, so we make sure that people are well remunerated. So if you have concerns about the price of the delegation, which is $2,300, that means that Espacio Encuentro de Mujeres is going to get remunerated well. And that means that every single person along the way that is providing services, meaning food, the food is not going to a vendor. It's not like in the United States where they're going to provide us with 3, 4, 5 receipts. These are people that are not going to be able to provide us receipts, but we trust. And fiscally, we need to account for that because we do exist in the United States. So we have to do magic for the IRS, but we want to put money in people's hands, and we want to make sure that money is worth it for them and it's going to lead them, it's going to last. So keep that in mind. And also for the groups, NGOs, grassroots, collective, groups that we'll be meeting with, they don't get access to funds. If Black groups in the United States have a hard time, like Amilcar's group and Afroresistance, you can believe that these groups in Panama have a rougher, tougher time. So we want to make sure to leave and put money in the group's hand so that they can move forward as well. Most of these groups do not have computers, do not have papers, do not have a location to meet, so we want to do the right thing by them. So what the last delegation that we did was for Colombia. We supported the candidacy of Francia Marquez. We took 50 women, all Black and some of color. That's also something really important. We predominantly work only with Black and other people of color. And that is by design. In our communities, people that come mostly from the United States are mostly white. And that's not the face that we want to show from Afro-resistance. We want to show that we do have politicized people that are active and people that are fighting on the ground in the United States, that are also immigrant, that also look like them, that also have families, that are also doing the work, right? So we model that in our communities. And the response that we always get is that never do groups from the United States come that look like us. We took the largest delegation of electoral observers in history to the United States, not even the Carter Center. And we did that by crowdsourcing. We didn't get funding for that. And we did that because we knew that we had to watch that election because there was a Black woman running that had death threats and attacks against her. So an attack against her was an attack against all of us. And we're very clear about that. And we're very centered in that. So that was the last one that we did. That was 2 years ago. And we did that twice because they had a runoff and they had to go back again. So we had to go back again and we went back again. Great. So I want to share my screen to share our site. So just give me a second to show you where all this stuff is. So if you go into afroresistance.org, here, share, and everybody can see my screen, right? So if you go into afroresistance.org, this is our main site here, our homepage, sorry. And then you have the About Us, Race and Gender Migration. I do encourage you to check all that out, fall in love with our site, and then click on the Travel with Us. On the Travel with Us is all the information there. There's some background information. A lot of the information that Angeli shared is here already with the draft itinerary, which is a tentative itinerary. And then here is the application, right? So here's the application. We tried not to make it very complicated, but we still have to gather information. So just be patient with it. Just be patient with it. This preferred accommodations, there's a disclaimer there. We're going to try our best, as I said before. In Method D, for example, we cannot guarantee that there will be single accommodations. We're trying our best. Right? So our Panamanian counterparts, for example, Latin America is not and our communities is not transactional like that, like how it is a lot of times here. People want to know also what people are bringing, so it's not an extractive practice. So people also want to know, like, so who's coming? What can we learn? Because people want to also really learn, especially from Black people, especially from people of color, especially from trans folk, lesbian, gay folk. People want to learn more information too. And they know that we're coming from over here. So they are really like excited to know and to learn and to expand their knowledge as well. So please share what you'd be willing to share with them. There will be interpreters available. And sometimes, usually, we end up organizing like micro sessions of skill sharing between the folks here and the folks there. And I'll share, honestly, I'm very proud that the current Vice President of Colombia uses gender inclusive language, because she took a micro learning on one of the first delegations that we did, where she shared, oh, that sounds so ugly, it sounds so strange. And we were like, no, you have to learn this, because this is where this is moving. And somebody did a workshop in Spanish around gender pronouns. So there we could see from there to here, there has been a lot of growth. And I want to take credit for that, and I will. And then there's the activity level question. It's really important that you do answer that honestly, because the different terrains are different. So we do have to make accommodations, right? And this is not, we're not judging. There's no phobias here. This is just, we want you to have the best experience possible. So please just answer this to your best, like where you fit in, where you feel that you fit in. Now, in regards to payments, Argelis has received a lot of questions around deposits, right? And we are working through the deposits. I believe that we worked out that there will be a deposit, August 15th, right? Argelis is the deadline for application and for a deposit. And then Argelis is working through some dates for payments that will be set up on the website, and they'll be announced. Today is Tuesday, so by Thursday, Friday, they'll be announced. So you'll know what those payments are. But then by September 30th, everything has to be paid in full. And that leads us to the next piece. The next piece is, we do have a fundraising platform, because we are trying to fundraise. We haven't launched this yet to the world, but we're launching it this week. Because the more money we fundraise, the less fees it will be for everybody, or for those that need support, right? So we want to offer some scholarships as well. We also want Panamanian counterparts to join us on the delegation. We do not want this delegation only to be from people from the United States. We also want to invite some folks like Amilcar. We would love for him to join us with his expertise. So we want to also invite some folks to come, and we want some Panamanian comrades like La Profesora Maria that's here with us today to join us throughout the time of the delegation. That requires funds, so we're fundraising. If folks here need to fundraise for their fees, this is the opportunity. And Angelis, if you could put the link of this Give Butter right in the chat, you can start your own fundraiser. And I did this as a sample here for Geneviève, right? So you can click on fundraise, right? And you can create your own fundraiser. Once you create your own fundraiser, you set up your own stuff, it's live. And you can get your people to donate specifically for your fees. And then you can write Angelis, and Angelis is going to put her email there. You can write Angelis and say, Angelis, I started up a fundraiser. So please add those fees. Please add whatever I fundraise to my fees. And Angelis will be like, great, this is excellent. And Angelis will also maybe share it. She can also share it, you know, Jonathan will share it on our newsletter, like these are the folks, these are their bios, like please consider, because whatever you fundraise helps us in the delegation too, right? So it goes towards your fees, it goes towards the delegation, everybody wins, and then you get to join us. So we want to make it as accessible as possible, and we're invested in everybody winning, because the more people that come on the delegation, guess what? The more advocacy we can do when we get back. And that's the goal. The goal is for us to push the needs of Black people, Black women and girls from Panama as they transit when we get back to the United States. So I'll pause there. I think I covered it all. Did I, Angelis? Did I? I think I did.
Yes, he did.
I did, right? And now if there are any questions about Panama, about what Amilcar spoke, about what Argelis shared, about what I spoke, let me remove Argelis's face from there so everybody is shared together. Now, you know, you can ask any questions. Yes, profesora.
Javier, please don't call me profesora.
Okay.
Yes, Maria Luisa, Maria, whichever is fine. I would like to hear a little bit about the role that you expect us to play if we participate in the delegation once we return. What connections would you like us to make? What a little bit about that.
Upon the return to the US?
To the US as a delegate. We've gone as a delegation, we've learned a lot, and then we return representing, right, information, a truth that many people here don't know. What follow-up do you like us to do? What sources of dissemination? Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. So some of in the previous delegations, and this conversation, we usually have pre-departure. So we usually have 2 or 3 conversations with the final, you know, the applicants when we come back. Well, not when we come back, before the departure, pre-departure. How folks have divided that up. We have had press conferences when we get back, right? We have had calls to the media, so pitches. We have had called your local congresspeople or legislators, joining other Black-led migrant organizations, because they're working on these issues. There is a few Black migrant organizations throughout the country. There's around 8 of us that work on Black migration, And we're all dealing with Black migrants that have come through El Tapón de Darién. That means that they need support. We all need support. If we're coming back from Panama, we need to join these organizations to see how we can support them. Because all of our organizations are hearing testimonies of neglect, not only from the Panamanian authorities, but from all the authorities of all those countries. And then when they get to the United States, the neglect from the non-Black immigrant organizations, right? So how can we be active now that we've heard firsthand what happens in Panama? Writing for Afroresistance, we have a blog. So how can we write, right? How can we research policy, right? We have regional calls that happen every month that Chevy coordinates. So, and we have been wanting more folks that have experience around migration to input around what direction those calls should take to be more organizing. And one of the challenges and limitations is that each country has different laws and regulations. But how powerful would it be that we could have a campaign that is regional? So this delegation could potentially help something like that. And that's a long-term plan or a mid-term plan. That's not an immediate plan. The point is to be more activated and more engaged politically with Afro-resistance and politically, specifically with Black migration.
Thank you. Very good. Thanks.
The question around children allowed and the same cause. Bianca, this is not something that from Afro-resistance we have considered because of the liability issues. It doesn't mean that we're opposed to it. It means that we haven't had a conversation about it. Having said that, I think we could have a conversation. I do not think the price would change because it's still, the price is more around the space and the lodging. And right, some folks, from my experience with previous delegation, local folks bring their children. But that's local folks bringing their children. That's not international folks bringing their children. And the liabilities are different. Because something happens to an international child in another country, we are liable for them. If something happens to a local child in their home country, it's their parent that's liable for them. So there's a different liability. And at the end of the day, I move at the speed of trust, but the law comes after me differently. So that's the only piece, right? Maya.
Hi, Genevieve. Nice to see
Hi.
you again. I was just curious about sort of the impact on Black communities in Panama with immigration, because to me, it's just a little bit unclear. So could you please elaborate a little bit on like the impact of of immigration through the Darién Gap to Black communities in Panama?
I'm not fully understanding your question.
So I noticed that there's like an intersection between like the immigration that's happening with the Darién Gap, and then there's also a conversation about Black communities in Panama and sort of the state of those communities. So I'm just having trouble like finding the connection between the two. I think it maybe just went over my head, but maybe just a little bit of clarification on how immigration impacts those communities.
You're talking about the local Panamanian communities?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a few, like if we talk about Darién, right, specifically, as Amilcar spoke about earlier, Darién is a Black and Indigenous community, right? And I'm not only gonna focus on Panama right now because I feel like this is like a a border issue. So also I'm gonna talk about Necoclí, which is on the other side of Colombia as well, right? So Necoclí and Darién, right? That's all Black and Indigenous land. And being Black and Indigenous land, that's also abandoned land, right? So structurally abandoned land, also very rich land, right? And natural resources. So a big influx of people to towns in the case of Necoclí, which is a beach town, that before was maybe like 400 people that were living there, to having over 1,000 people, 2,000 people, to 10,000 people transit per day. One, creates an economic explosion where people migrate, and those people that migrate, we understand, are not Black. They're people that have the resources to migrate, displace local people that are Black, to then put in little hotels, little businesses to service and exploit migrants that do not have the funds, but they still exploit them because they can. On top of that, there's a sanitary on both sides. There's a sanitary I'm trying to figure out the word in English. Hay un tema de sanidad.
So health and sanitary issue.
Yeah. Sí voy a comer pronto. Gracias. There is now a sanitary hazard, right? Which in Panama they call it biohazard, because Panama has been Panama as a whole in the city, and mostly Black communities, has been structurally abandoned in regard to sanitation, right? And many issues, but in sanitation that we can see on the street, garbage is everywhere piled up. So in those areas, that doesn't even exist. So now with the influx of migrants, it's even worse. There is no sanitation services, and I'm talking about showers, I'm talking about toilets, all those things. So now we have added to those issues human waste in Black communities, right? As Argelis put there, Doctors Without Borders were forced to leave because, not of the sanitation issue, because of a fiscal issue. Doctors Without Borders were getting more money than the Department of Health to deal with the migration issues. And the government didn't like that, right? So they had to, so the Panamanian government said, there is no way. But then they weren't able or willing because of a capacity to provide the support. Meanwhile, people are not getting the attention that they're supposed to be getting throughout the whole country. So the impact on Black people that migration has, and for me, it's very hard. And Amilcar, Cherry, Argelis, and I have had these conversations. Your question is very important. And also, it could be very dangerous as well, because it does this thing of putting migrants against the Black community, right? But it's a very important question. But it's also used as a tool to divide. Like, also, what's the impact of migration on Black communities? Understanding that there is a large number of African people, of Haitian people, of Brazilian people that are Black, that are migrating and transiting through that border right now. Panama has a very high trafficking of African issues, right? So yes, there is an impact on the Black community, and there is an African diasporic issue of neglect of Black people throughout the world that is leading to the migration of Black people, and they're coming through Panama.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great explanation. Appreciate it.
right. So we are at 8:06. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, including my daughter that does not like to eat without me. And that's a beautiful thing. If there are any other questions, please get those applications in. If you have any questions or any issues, if you need any support, get in touch with Argelis. She's there also to support the process. We're really excited for everybody to join us. If you need the due date, yes, August the 15th. And there's a learning module, yes, about Panama. And then I also shared the book. It is hot in New York City today. So,
Sorry to speak without
Uh-huh.
I imagine that we're gonna have, you mentioned a model. I imagine we're gonna have other meetings before the trip,
yes,
right?
yes. We will have some pre-departure meetings and orientations. At least two. At least two. We usually do. There'll be a meeting around like what Panama is, the history, all that stuff. And then there'll be another one in preparation, specifically the logistics, what to expect, the itinerary, and all that before we get to Panama. And then in Panama, we'll repeat a little bit of both. And that will mostly be then Chevy and Espacio Encuentro de Mujeres.
To just mention one thing that I think is important here, and that the Black community in Panama has been kind of sounding the alarm on this for like 10 to 12 years. This what we are seeing now, which has reached a head. We've been talking about this for a long time, mostly ignored, I think, until it hit a political crisis up north. And one of the main reasons was because we've seen the disparate treatment by authorities as it related to not just our folks who exist and reside in the regions, but also in the disparate treatment between migrants who are Black and not Black. One of the things that we would see for a long time, and some of this is anecdotal. I don't know of actual or documented quantitative evidence to this effect, but there was an understanding that if you're a Black, so Panama has an acuerdo with Costa Rica where they basically ship everyone straight to the border. And up for a while that worked, because then they would the proposition was that they would ship them to Nicaragua, to the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. Well, Nicaragua shut that down, and so Costa Rica shut that down. What we had been seeing was that white migrants were allowed to pay $50, whatever, to get off the bus and get dropped off somewhere random in the city. And Black migrants they were never given that opportunity. Now, there's an exploitative component to that, obviously, for everyone involved. But the reality is that there was in addition to just the day-to-day treatment, there were opportunities being given to kind of blend in or disappear into Panamanian society that was given to non-white folks that were not afforded to Black folk. And there are other instances of this, but that was just one example that we had been seeing for a number of years, that the folks in the movement have sought to address. 8, 9 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, there were folks who were already, gathering, meal kits and things of that nature for folks in these regions to help them, well before the Doctors Without Borders and all these people started to jump into the fray. it was our folks who were at that forefront, who were seeking to address this because we saw what was happening. I think that's something that's important to recognize and acknowledge.
Thank you, American. All right, folks. Thank you very much. We will be signing off now, unless folks have any more questions. We'll see you before we leave to Panama, and hopefully you'll be joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity.
Maria, it was great
Hopefully
seeing
everyone's
you.
You too, Genevieve.
It's so many
been a while, but
years.
you look the same after so many years. Let's exchange emails.
Sí,
Same to
te lo
Chevy,
envío,
también gusto en verte, Chevy.
te lo envío ya, espérate.
Ay, sí, mándamelo.
Are you still you were in North Carolina? You were in
Ay,
Carolina?
mismito. I'm still in North Carolina, sí.
Resistance. Ahí va.
Ok, gracias.
Se ve
Chao,
muy guapa.
Genevieve. Chao, Chevy. Bye,
Chao.
Arelis and
Ya
everyone else.
voy.
Gracias.
Ven acá. Mira mi
Bye.
bella hija que me viene a
Ay,
buscar.
para verla. ¡What! Bella de
Tú la
verdad.
conociste bebé, ¿verdad?
Sí, conocí al varón. Tú tienes un varón
Ah,
también.
sí, no, no, ella todavía no estaba, no, ella todavía no había nacido, ella no había
No, sí,
sido,
yo sé que el varón es el primero, sí, 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 sí. ¿Cómo te llamas, Bella?
Ana Yancy.
Ana Yancy, ok, hermoso nombre. Yo tengo una prima que se llama Anais, que la invité a que participara y no sé qué pasó, pero yo estoy segura que ella está interesada en saber sobre esto también. Sí,
¿ya? Ok,
bueno,
ya vienen a buscar.
hasta
Ok,
luego.
chao.
Estamos en
Buenas
contacto,
tardes,
gracias.
buenas noches. Hasta luego.
Buenas
Bye.
noches, chao. Abrazos a
Chao.
Chevy.
¿Cuál?
Ay,